welcome to the dungeon with Harlan and Andrew.
Hi, hello. We are here. We're back. It's Thursday. Yes, I had to think about it for a second, but we're here, so it's Thursday.
And I'm here. And I missed. I guess I should start by saying why I missed last week's show.
I wasn't going to bring it up.
Well, I was mowing the yard. My phone was dying, so I plugged it into charge, and I was like, I'm just gonna mow the yard for a little bit, and then I'll run in and do the show. And I didn't know that time flies when you're mowing the yard. And I came in the house. And I saw the text from Harlan like, hey, are you doing the show? And I was like, oh my God. And it was like, the show was almost over. And yeah, it was insane. What a stupid reason to miss a show. Mowing the yard? That's as lame as it gets.
And, it was fine. Aaron jumped on. We had a great time. I'm just sad you missed Ted because Ted's one of my favorite people in the world. And he's the person who taught me how to DM. So,
oh, man.
I'm going to have to do Ted part 2 down the road just so you all can meet.
I apologize to Ted and to everybody else. It was ridiculous. Anyway, we're back. What is this, episode 8 already?
I think so, yeah.
Wow, crazy. We're flying along. And welcome. Thanks for watching. Quick announcement. Now our podcast is finally up. So if you'd prefer to check out past episodes in podcast form, it should be pretty much wherever you find podcasts. I know it's definitely on Apple Music. Should be on Spotify. So yeah. These will be podcast episodes down the road.
Yeah, send it to your friends. As we say on our Monday show, Better Than Heroes, if you are having fun, if you like listening to this, the best way to support us is to just tell someone who likes D&D about the show. So
yeah, or any kind of nerd stuff.
Yeah.
Well, we have a special guest for this episode. Very fun guy. I know him. We are both players in another game, which I don't think we've had any guests before where we're both players. But please welcome to the show, Joe Letourneau.
Hi, how you doing? Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. Yeah, definitely. I guess right off the bat, what is your brief history with tabletop role-playing games?
Yeah, it was not something that I ever did as a kid. It was a after grad school thing. It was right when 5e was coming out, and another colleague of mine, we went to art school all together, started a game with all art school folks. And it was a lot of fun. We were playing a homebrew campaign, but we were using the 5e system. And I was like, I'm going to be, like that edgelord rogue. It's going to be awesome. I'm going to be the evil player. And then once that campaign wrapped up disastrously with the ending of the world, did not go well.
The bad ending.
I jumped right into to DMing. It was right when the starter set was coming out. So we did The Lost Mine, and then I DM'd a couple other campaigns using the Wizard of the Coast modules. And then went back to being a player, because I think that is kind of important. I played for a little bit, and then I DM'd for a while, and I'm back to playing. And I think pretty soon I'm going to jump back into DMing. Just to sort of I think it's important. I don't know. It felt to me like I was getting burned out as a DM, and having to shoulder everything. So it's nice to, have that, time playing for a while. So I'm going to be jumping back into DMing after it's been, I don't know, maybe a couple years. But I'm looking forward to jumping back in and, getting in the old saddle.
So when you first made the switch from being a player to DMing, I think that's a thing that I want to cheer people. Every person I ever DM for, I always want to be like, you should start DMing. But what in your mind, what kind of pushed you to make the leap and say I don't just want to do this, I also want to do this?
Yeah, it was the urge to keep playing, but our DM was like not able to continue being the DM. So he wanted to switch to being a player, and it was like, well, I'll DM for you. And it was really nice to have that little bit of a safety net. Like, who the hell knows the jumping rules? I still don't know the rules about like how long is a long jump. You know, like it's nice to have someone there who, you know, like can give you an assist on like, oh, like this is that plan, even if it's just sort of like, especially as a new DM, knowing that there's you know, like if you both don't know the rule, it's probably like, who cares, and we can make it up. It gives you that, at least that little bit of permission, that you don't feel like you're letting the other players down because you don't know every nuance of the Dungeon Master Guide. You know, like it gives you a little bit of confidence in that way. And having a module, I think, was really helpful too. But it was a new way to sort of like expand what you can do as a player when you're controlling a whole lot of things, and you do have a little bit more, I think, you know, like sort of direction and way to move the story in ways that you find interesting. And it was a real challenge and a lot of fun. I loved making the jump, and that's why I kept going for a few sessions. It's a great way to, you know, like stay in touch with these friends, you know, like once you get out of that environment where everybody's together in the same like sort of classroom kind of thing, and then, you know, everybody's spreading out. Now we're like, I'm connected with people who live in different states, and it's like it would be impossible to see them. And this is, you know, like before the era of coronavirus cocktail hours that everybody's doing online stuff. It was like, this was the way to keep in touch with folks who move away.
Yeah, that was the first game I ever DM'd. Was specifically that. I still have all my like files are called like D&D Indiana game, because I moved out here, and it was, you know, a lot of my friends from college who we were doing that exact same thing of like, this is just a reason. Sure, we do the phone call and we do the catch up for like, you know, an hour or whatever long phone call to just like, how are you doing, and running through life stuff. But this is it's such a good way to not talk about your life, but just like hang out and do something and goof. Yeah.
You think about your job too much of the time, and then when you're hanging out without any pretext, it's like, so how's things with work? You know, like it instantly goes there. And this, you know, using the sort of like fantasy, you're like, well, there's the dragon from last week, what are we gonna do about it? You know, like, like and it's a way to skip all of that stuff.
It's such a good you know, like now is the best time ever to start playing role-playing game TRPGs, because like, you know, it seems like this is true for you. Are you playing a game online right now?
Yeah, I'm playing a game with Josh, who was on another one of your episodes. We're playing a dungeon dive. I'm actually playing two games that he's DMing. One that we've been playing a longer campaign, and one that's like pretty fresh. But I want to start. I've been working around right now trying to figure out how to DM. There was a module that came out in the 80s that was about it was like a Ghostbusters role-playing game, and I'm trying to figure out how to like make that, because it's kind of more on like the dungeon world system where it's just 2d6. So I'm trying to figure out how to fit it to 5e rules, so that it's, you know, familiar with people who are more familiar with like that system, so you don't have to learn a whole new, like, what is it, mind and body, and, you know, like, what is it? So I just like the idea, because that seems to always be one of the challenges, is like, what's your motivation for the party being together? Like, there's always like 3 sessions where you're trying to figure out like, why is my character here?
3 sessions. I'm impressed if you get to it in that point.
I just love the idea that like, this is your job. You're like, you're a Ghostbuster, and like people are hiring you because their castle is haunted with like banshees, and you got to figure that out, like how to go through.
Yeah, that'd be sweet. That'd be a good game.
Yeah.
I know. So
I love ghosts too. So ghosts are like my favorite.
I just have to figure out how to make turn undead not be game breaking. Because why isn't everyone a cleric?
And not to go too far down this wormhole, I'm going to do something real quick. I'm sorry. Hold on. Stay right there. I'm walking for the podcast. I'm walking away from my computer because I want to show you something that I love. Have you ever heard of Ghost Walk, the Ghost Walk campaign option?
No. I'm writing this down.
It's just it's like a rolled over campaign setting in from like when it switched over to 4th edition, kind of like right when it came out. And but it's like a undead world. It's like just mostly ghosts. It's super weird. It's just like a fun little tidbit to check out. Some of the best old lore I've ever run across. But okay, I want to know. It sounds like you have pretty decent experience running other games besides D&D. I'm trying to like find more games right now. I'm trying to expand outside of 5e. I just got Mutants in the Dark. I think I said that wrong. But what is it? Mutants in the Night? Oh shoot, I can't remember right now.
Is it the superhero one?
No. It's Orion Black wrote it. Anyway, sorry. What other games do you run?
I mean, I've only ever run games through the 5e system, but I've listened to a lot of role-playing podcasts and watch other videos that dive into those other systems, just to sort of like get different flavors for how people play. And it was something I started doing because I felt like I was getting bogged down with my DMing, that like I was coming at it from a very like, especially with the modules, like I feel like you can kind of get railroaded into playing it the way that the book is designed for you to play it. And it's nice to sort of like, I wasn't ready to, create my own homebrew world. But it was nice to see sort of different ways that people approach like just like different levels of levity or seriousness, or like how much everyone's doing character voices versus not, or like different things like that. And like just getting different perspectives on what DMing can be, and then stealing as much as I can that I like from different ones. Different systems, I think. Sorry, go ahead.
What's something you've stolen that has worked for you?
I mean, something that I stole, that's a great question. I think there's a piece of advice I remember hearing on some podcasts that was like, you're like the key to DM voices, because it is fun when the DM does a whole bunch of voices. Like the key is like, make a list of horrible impersonations, like celebrity impersonations that you can do. And like, whenever you have a character, like write that down. So like, okay, like we were playing Storm King Giant, whatever.
King's Thunder.
Storm King Thunder. And like, okay, well, there's like the Cloud Giant who's in the thing. And it's like, okay, well, I need a character. And it's like, oh, well, I'm going to make him like that scene in Mary Poppins where the guy is like floating up and he talks like this. Like that's an easy thing that you can just be like Mary Poppins guy. And you write that down. And then you just you never forget what that guy's voice was, because you just look at it and you're like, oh, Mary Poppins guy. Yeah, I could do that, So like little things like that, just like sort of like little tips and tricks. And then just sort of like giving myself permission to like not be serious about it, I think is another thing. It's like, oh yeah, like you see, like on the Adventure Zone, like, oh, it goes off the rails completely. And they're just like laughing and having a good time. And like, it eases up the pressure when you feel like, oh, I'm ruining everything for my players because they're going off course. And it's like, no, you're not. Like, it's okay. Like, just let it be, which is hard as a DM to like, you feel a lot of pressure to like make sure everyone's having such a good time. And
it's hard to do that work of like figuring out, because some people I'm a player who's like, I want the seriousness, I don't want it to be like, I don't need for it to be taken seriously, but the thing I want is like the moment when it matters, when it like emotionally affects me. And I mean, that can happen in silly games too, no problem. But like, but that trying to guess like what players want is tough. And I totally agree that I think like, just seeing the writing of how different games approach that is super, super helpful.
This is something that Harlan and I were trying to name this. You can help us name this, Joe.
Oh, yeah.
This is a situation as a DM where you have multiple NPCs in a scene, and they're talking to each other, and the players are not talking, and you just sound like a lunatic doing
Oh yeah.
this conversation between two NPCs.
Uh-huh.
We were saying there has to be a term for that. We should think of a what that is when you have
Yeah.
a DM who has to be like, no, I told them not to go, and they're like, well, they went anyway.
Yeah. It's like, yeah, you're like the ventriloquist and the dummy.
yeah.
Weird.
Yeah.
Like, what did you think about that? I don't know, buddy.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. You
It's
feel
so
like a
hard. I had one time I was doing that, and I think it was my daughter. She's like, "Are we gonna be playing in this scene at all?" And I was like, "Yeah, but I mean, they have to also talk
Yeah.
to each other."
We got to get through this exposition. Come on, take notes.
Yeah.
Yep, I feel that way about Better Than Heroes. I'm like, sometimes I catch myself just like the two characters talking, and I'm like, but I want to listen to like how like funny and good
Yeah.
character stories are, but then all of a sudden like this character needs to say this thing to this other character, and it's hard to like balance. Yeah, for sure.
It's crazy.
Yeah. I think a trick there is like just to know to like scale back the number of NPCs in any scene.
Yeah.
Like never more than 2 ever.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
I try, 1, maybe 2, but yeah, that way it's just like this is the only voice that you all have to worry about.
Yep, it was
Totally.
too late for me after I realized there was just 4 of them.
You're like,
on a
oh,
boat.
no.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
I was trapped in. Yeah, so
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's inevitable sometimes. They're like, oh, like the city council meeting. Like, oh Jesus. Like
Yeah.
here it comes. Like,
yeah,
oh, we're gonna have one of these. But those, like exposition heavy sessions can be fun too. I think it's just it's also difficult like when you like split the party and like you want to have each player have like a moment to shine. So it's like, oh, here's your thing, and then your other players are just kind of like twiddling their thumbs. So like, yeah, I think like it's trying to strike a balance and making sure that people stay engaged and don't start like, I'm gonna like Instagram for the next 20 minutes while we interact only with this one character. That's tough. I still haven't figured that out yet. If you all have any gems for that, I would love to hear them.
I think moving the spotlight around enough so that real quickly in the game the players just know, oh, the spotlight will come to me. Like then they just like, even if they don't really have anything like fully on their mind, you just let them know, hey, the spotlight swings around. It doesn't matter who's clamoring for it. It comes around to everyone, regardless of how vocal and how like vibrant their character is.
Yeah.
And then another thing that I do that works pretty well, and maybe I picked this up from TV writing or something, but I love it when people split up the party and there's multiple scenes. I think that if there's one like common wisdom rule that I would like to do away with, it's don't split up the party, because I think that so many fun things can happen with split parties, and there's so much fun tension happens when people can be separated. But what I do with that is I kind of check in with each scene, and I basically move it like one beat at a time, and then I check in with the next scene and I move it one beat, and I just keep rotating it like that instead of letting each scene totally resolve itself. Because then you've got players who are, and they're like, wow, this has been like 22 minutes, I haven't done anything. So you just kind of like, okay, well, all right, let's pan over here back to the tavern. What are you doing in the tavern? And I think that is really helpful too, because it just keeps the little gears turning.
Yeah. One thing that I do like about jumping around between players in social games that I found is like it's really often that a party has like one face of the party, and that character, like every time you roll into some hamlet, like the bard or whoever like comes in and does all the social interaction, where every time the most fun social interaction when the barbarian is like clumsily knocking everything over in the tavern. Like those are the fun ones and the ones people remember. So it's nice to have that sort of forced mechanic to make those other characters have social interactions. And that's one of the reasons that I like advocate for that. That's
the thing I've said this before on here too, and I think I deeply believe in, is that ones are as interesting as 20s. And like characters being bad at I only make characters who are bad at stuff now, because it's just way more fun for me to be like, I'm terrible, like, and I'm so and
then their accomplishments are that much more striking,
for
because it's like, whoa, like you pulled that off.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And
I want to sneak in a quick question from the chat because it's
Sure,
just
sure,
related for this, really related to this. If you're hanging out in the chat and you have questions, feel free to post them. We'll answer them. Someone asked, have you ever used turn-based role-playing initiative, like in a scene where, like keeping up the combat style turn initiative, but for role-playing? Have you ever been a part of that or experienced that at all?
Yeah. Like I've tried to do that, but not necessarily of having like an initiative order, but just making sure that everybody who wants to contribute has a chance. And it's, again, not just like the player with the high charisma score, like owning the conversation, to sort of like say like, okay, that's what, like this character wants to do, like to go around the table when you're physically there, be like, like scope everybody out and make sure that everybody who wants to weigh in can weigh in.
Truly.
I think that's a way to sort of like not necessarily like treat social interactions in the same way that you do combat. Like having like really strict, well, it's not your turn to weigh in on that. I like the use of the free action. I like the sort of like the free action of having more conversation in combat. I think is really fun. Like encourage that, and I think it helps keep the players engaged in combat too, when like the enemies are talking to you and you're talking to the enemies, just totally interspersed. Like I think it keeps people engaged, and that's kind of fun too.
Definitely,
because it would happen.
The fun thing about
silent, there's that realism of like, oh, we have to, we're coordinating, or we're like pissed,
But I like about the free action and not initiatives and the role playing aspect is that inevitably a character will say like, okay, I pulled the lever, just as another character saying like, I'd like to check that lever, and it's like that split second of like, no, he said he's doing it first, like, and so you get those like, oh god, moments, which I really like. That if it was a turn order, you wouldn't get, because it'd be like, well, it's just not your turn to do anything. So I like that, like chaos is
absolutely
great.
It's fun.
So we have a D20 question table. If you could roll a D20.
All right.
And again, if you have questions in chat, we can maybe get to those as well.
It's a natural one.
Oh no!
oh man,
this is the worst.
No, I almost said this before you rolled. Everyone who watches this consistently, every time at the end of every episode, people are like, tell us what happens when you roll a 1 in chat, and we haven't revealed it. So this is it.
Here it comes.
This is it right
now.
One. What's the most embarrassing voice you've ever tried to pull off for a character? And we'd also ask that you show us that you do it.
Yeah.
I already did my Mary Poppins floating guy voice,
which is good. I like
it. You definitely have to do it. You definitely have to try and do it on stream.
There was, oh boy, I mean, there was one where it's like player favorite was like sexy Spanish guy who would always talk like this. Yes, and this was boys, and he was like, "Come to my tower. We will climb to the top of the tower, and we will look upon the scenery." And like awful impersonations. Gonna be memorable character voices. And as long as you don't tell people who you're trying to do, it works.
That was pretty good for a bad one, I will say.
Okay.
All of my worst ones are just like super inconsistent. I can never like keep them going the whole time. They just like float. That one was good.
And sometimes it'll be the character won't show up for a long time, and then they come back, and I'm like, oh no, I don't remember what they sound like, and people will be like, that wasn't what they sounded like. And then I feel bad.
There is a mercy on DMs. It's sort of a blessing and a curse that oftentimes your NPCs aren't going to make that many repeat visits. Like half of them are going to die or just never be seen again. So you don't have to sweat it as at least, like, oh, how many times are they going to go back to that same town or whatever? I think you have to be a little bit more careful as a player. Is one of those decisions. One player that I'm currently playing has a sort of Tim Gunn-esque voice, and I regret that decision a little bit right now because it's been like 20 sessions with him. always talking like this. He's a monk, and it's like really bad. But I'm like, I'm committed to it, and it's like, couldn't I have done something like a little more interesting?
Totally.
Nope.
I feel that same way. Yeah,
What's yours,
I
Andrew? Tell
have
us.
the regret.
Spill it.
Oh, my worst one. Gosh, I don't know.
we all
I
gotta
was
say
trying to
that.
think. I've had some bad ones, but I can't. I mean, it's usually just a bad accent, like an Irish accent, like, "Oh, thanks for coming to my tavern" or something. It's just like
That's
a Lucky
classic.
Charms-esque Irish accent. Yeah, I'm trying to think of just a bad voice.
Yeah.
If anyone I played with is in chat, I'm sure they're throwing out their own suggestions.
What about this terrible voice?
Yeah,
You're gonna have
this one's
great
pretty bad.
self-esteem after looking through the chat.
Bunch of
I
white
tried to
dudes
avoid-
just doing bad accents, you know.
Like with Better Than Heroes, I tried to steer away from English accents. I mean, the Wind Rider has an like Australian accent, but I didn't want to do an English accent for the regular guy's voice. But I'm like, but now I kind of think back and I'm like, oh, I wish I kind of had just done an English accent because it sounds more fantasy-esque than not. But I don't know. I just felt at that point when I made up the voice, I was like, I feel sick of doing English accent characters. So
yeah,
I didn't do it. But if I went back and did it again, I think I would have given him an English accent. But
well,
live and learned.
I think mine is like truly a proto Goliathan voice. I was like trying to do a cowboy voice for a kobold I played for a while, and it was my second campaign with this group, and we played for a year together weekly and went from 1 to 20. And my first character was a deep gnome and a druid, and he was up here. He was more like up here. And then my kobold was more like trying to be a little bit country, but every single session, other players would be like, "You're just doing your old character's voice," because I would just slowly slip into it, and that was
kind of years.
That was embarrassing because I just had no control. I literally just like would go sense memory until like, oh, I'm up here again. Why am I up here?
Yeah,
You know, they're both small characters, so it's just like, shoot, I can't get away from this.
This is tough.
Yeah. So now we're gonna change out the one. I think this is what we should do. Is now we should change out the one and rebuild the surprise of like.
Yep, there'll be a new awkward surprise question.
I'm sorry, future one rollers.
Do we have any chat questions?
Let me see. I got too excited about that and I lost track. No, I mean we had that one question that was a really good one. We spent some time on. It's your last chance, folks. Throw them in the chat if you've got a question. So I do want to ask though. You're playing with Josh, one of our previous guests. You all are both playing with him. He's notoriously, supposedly, a very precise DM. You know, he really.
Oh yeah, I do want to talk about this because you showed us your little thing before the show.
Yeah, so he holds you to the rules. I want more info. Yeah. Well, first of all, just show everybody what.
Yeah. So
this was viewers this cool thing. Well, I'll give them the context. I was just telling them that I've been chatting with Josh about having to keep track of my arrows in the game, something I've never had to do. And this is something that I was going to ask the two of you, how you feel about that, being that granular in games, that realistic of like, you have X amount of rations, and if you eat them, then you have to find food somewhere. Like, how do you feel? Where do you like the balance in that in your games? And the kind of like, where do you each draw the line in that?
Yeah.
I totally put the onus on the players. I totally am like, I mean, I don't manage characters, character sheets. I just straight up don't do it, and which might make me, that might be a weakness. I don't know. Maybe I should know characters' player sheets better, but I'm just like, you tell me what your character does. And yeah, that's my kind of approach to it. What about you?
Yeah, I think I'm more of a loose, like I've never required a material component, like, oh man, like, or carry weight or, you know, things like that. The minutia to me, like, I don't know. I feel like it gets in the way of the storytelling, and that's sort of like I get people who are like they want that level of immersion. Like no, this is like you don't have infinite arrows, and like what's the point of some of these magic items that give you infinite arrows if you never count my arrows anyways? So that's fair. And I agree. I think it's like if that's the game that your players want to play, like cool, like get gritty, do like the like the modified rest rules, and like all that stuff. But for me, like if you want to like breeze through, like you're going from point A to point B, and you're just gonna sort of like roll to see if there's random encounters, and there's not, like okay, great, you just make it there, and that's fine, and we don't have to worry about like, oh well, now you have to go to the general store and get hardtack. But this is what we were talking about. But for one of Josh's campaigns, I bought this little trinket on Etsy. It's a little quiver. It's got little arrows, and when you use one, you store it there, so you can keep track of all your ammo if you have a DM who wants you to keep track of all.
Now I have to pick. Now I have to pick one of those up.
You gotta buy one.
Yeah, drop us that link. We'll
I'll have to look it up. I got it a while ago.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for being on the show, Joe.
Absolutely.
Great.
No, it was super fun.
Yeah.
And thanks for everybody who tuned in. And if you're listening to this in podcast form, thanks for listening to it there. And please do us a favor by rating it or reviewing it, wherever you happen to find this as a podcast. Thanks to Justin and Colin for our sweet intro and outro music. Anything else? Who am I forgetting?
Amelia does our intro too.
My daughter does our intro announcement. Totally.
Yeah, and that's it. Yeah, thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for tuning in, everybody.
We'll see you around.
Let's see you next week. Oh, and here's an important announcement. If you have a DM in one of your games, if you're listening to this, if you're watching this, send them our way. We always are looking for new DM guests. And
we love people we don't know too. It's fun to talk to our friends.
Totally.
We will interview any DM. So throw it out here.
Totally. And as you see in the show is they're gonna have a good time. We're not gonna. You just saw the worst thing that can happen when you roll a 1. It wasn't that bad.
It's gonna get worse though.
Assuming it doesn't change. All right.
Andrew, I'm gonna do your line for you. Tip your DM.
Oh yeah, tip your DM.
Everybody
tip your DM.
All right.
All right.
Thanks, y'all. Bye.